Its agent complicates the situation. If now, in spite of resistance, the original tendency continues, effort makes its appearance, and along with effort, strain or squeeze. Will, in the narrower sense of the word, then comes upon the scene, whenever, along with the tendency, the strain and squeeze are sustained. But the resistance may be great enough to check the tendency, or even to reverse its path. In that case we, if we were the original agents or subjects of the tendency, are overpowered. The phenomenon turns into one of tension simply, or of necessity succumbed to, according as the opposing power is only equal or is superior to ourselves. Whoever describes an experience in such terms as these, describes an experience of activity. If the word have any meaning, it must denote what there is found. There is complete activity in its original and first intention. What is known as, is what there appears. The experiencer of such a situation possesses all that the idea contains. He feels the tendency, the obstacle, the will, the strain, the triumph, or the passive giving up, just as he feels the time, the space, the swiftness or intensity, the movement, the weight and color, the pain and pleasure, the complexity, or whatever remaining characters the situation may involve. He goes through all that can ever be imagined where activity is supposed. If we suppose activities to go on outside of our experience, it is in forms like these that we must suppose them, or else give them some other name, for the word activity has no imaginable content whatever, save these experiences of process, obstruction, striving, strain or release, ultimate qualia as they are of the life given us to be known. Were this the end of the matter, one might think that whenever we had successfully lived through an activity situation we should have to be permitted, without provoking contradiction, to say that we had been really active, that we had met real resistance, and had really prevailed. Lott says somewhere that, to be an entity, all that is necessary is to gelten as an entity, to operate, or be felt, experienced, recognized, or in any way realized as such. In our activity experiences, the activity assuredly fulfills Lott's demand. It makes itself gelten. It is witnessed at its work. No matter what activities there may really be in this extraordinary universe of ours, it is impossible for us to conceive of any one of them being either lived through or authentically known otherwise than in this dramatic shape of something sustaining a felt purpose against felt obstacles, and overcoming or being overcome. What sustaining means here is clear to anyone who has lived through the experience, but to no one else, just as loud, red, sweet means something only to beings with ears, eyes, and tongues. The percipi in these originals of experience is the esse. The curtain is the picture. If there is anything hiding in the background, it ought not to be called activity, but should get itself another name. This seems so obviously true that one might well experience astonishment at finding so many of the ablest writers on the subject flatly denying that the activity we live through in these situations is real. Merely to feel active is not to be active, in their sight. The agents that appear in the experience are not real agents, the resistances do not really resist, the effects that appear are not really effects at all. Footnote: Verborum gratia. The feeling of activity is not able, qua feeling, to tell us anything about activity. Loveday, Mind and S, Volume X, 1190-11, page 463. A sensation or feeling of activity is not looked at in another way, an experience of activity at all. It is a mere sensation, shut up within which you could by no reflection get the idea of activity. Whether this experience is or is not later on a character essential to our perception and our idea of activity, it as it comes first is not in itself an experience of our activity at all. It, as it comes first, is only so for extraneous reasons, and only so for an outside observer. Bradley, Appearance and Reality, 2nd edition, page 605. In dem tatig Gefühle liegt an sich nicht der geringste Beweis für das Vorhandensein einer psychischen Tätigkeit. Münsterberg, Grundzüge der Psychologie. I could multiply similar quotations, and would have introduced some of them into my text to make it more concrete, save that the mingling of different points of view in most of these authors' discussions, not in Münsterberg's, make it impossible to disentangle exactly what they mean. I am sure in any case to be accused of misrepresenting them totally, even in this note, by omission of the context. So the less I name names, and the more I stick to abstract characterization of a merely possible style of opinion, the safer it will be. And apropos of misunderstandings, I may add to this note a complaint on my own account. Professor Stout, in the excellent chapter on mental activity in Volume 1 of his Analytic Psychology, takes me to task for identifying spiritual activity with certain muscular feelings, and gives quotations to bear him out. They are from certain paragraphs on the self, in which my attempt was to show what the central nucleus of the activities that we call ours is, in Principles of Psychology, Volume 1, pages 299 to 305. I found it in certain intracephalic movements which we habitually oppose as subjective to the activities of the transcorporeal world. I sought to show that there is no direct evidence that we feel the activity of an inner spiritual agent as such. I should now say the activity of I-consciousness as such. See the first essay, Does Consciousness Exist? There are, in fact, three distinguishable activities in the field of discussion: the elementary activity involved in the mere that of experience, in the fact that something is going on, and the further specification of this something into two whats, an activity felt as ours, and an activity ascribed to objects. Stout, as I apprehend him, identifies our activity with that of the total experience process, and when I circumscribe it as a part thereof, accuses me of treating it as a sort of external appendage to itself, as if I separated the activity from the process which is active. But all the processes in question are active, and their activity is inseparable from their being. My book raised only the question of which activity deserved the name of ours. So far as we are persons, and contrasted and opposed to an environment, movements in our bodies figure as our activities, and I am unable to find any other activities that are ours in this strictly personal sense. There is a wider sense in which the whole choir of heaven and furniture of the earth and their activities are ours, for they are our objects. But we are here only another name for the total process of experience, another name for all that is, in fact, and I was dealing with the personal and individualized self exclusively in the passages with which Professor Stout finds fault. The individualized self, which I believe to be the only thing properly called self, is a part of the content of the world experienced. The world experienced, otherwise called the field of consciousness, comes at all times with our body as its center of vision, center of action, center of interest. Where the body is here. When the body acts, is now. What the body touches is this. All other things are there and then and that. These words of emphasized position imply a systematization of things with reference to a focus of action and interest which lies in the body. And the systematization is now so instinctive, was it ever not so, that no developed or active experience exists for us at all except in that ordered form. So far as thoughts and feelings can be active, their activity terminates in the activity of the body, and only through first arousing its activities can they begin to change those of the rest of the world. The body is the storm center, the origin of coordinates, the constant place of stress in all that experience train. Everything circles around it and is felt from its point of view. The word I, then, is primarily a noun of position, just like this and here. Activities attached to I, this position must have prerogative emphasis, and if activities have feelings, must be felt in a peculiar way. The word my designates the kind of emphasis. I see no inconsistency whatever in defending on the one hand my activities as unique and opposed to those of outer nature, and on the other hand in affirming after introspection that they consist in movements in the head. The my of them is the emphasis, the feeling of prospective interest in which they are dyed. End footnote. It is evident from this that mere descriptive analysis of any one of our activity experiences is not the whole story, that there is something still to tell about them that has led such able writers to conceive of a Simon Pure activity, of an activity an sich that does, and doesn't merely appear to us to do so, and compared with whose real doing all this phenomenal activity is but a specious sham. The metaphysical question opens here. And I think that the state of mind of one possessed by it is often something like this. It is all very well, we may imagine him saying, to talk about certain experience series taking on the form of feelings of activity, just as they might take on musical or geometric forms. Suppose that they do so. Suppose that we feel a will to stand a strain. Does our feeling do more than record the fact that the strain is sustained? The real activity, meanwhile, is the doing of the fact. And what is the doing made of before the record is made? What in the will enables it to act thus? And these trains of experience themselves, in which activities appear, what makes them go at all? Does the activity in one bit of experience bring the next bit into being? As an empiricist you cannot